Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out RV Daydream. And it seems like no matter what you change in your RV towing rig or trailer, you always have to buy something to accommodate.
What have you been up to?
I've been riding on a daydream.
So you guys have been following us for a while, and people that are new, we just purchased this back in November. This is a 2019 F250 Super Duty. Shortly after that, we purchased a 2020 Rockwood Ultralight. It's a 2604WS. We then went ahead and got a hitch system that was above and beyond what was really necessary, but for the peace of mind we wanted to do it, and we got a Pro Pride hitch. However, the truck that this one replaced and the trailer that replaced our old trailer, we had a tow shield or a rock shield or a mud flap, whatever you want to call it, that was mounted on the 97 F250 that I used to have, which is an old body style, and it did a spectacular job. We love that thing. It worked perfect. It was flawless. Let me show you. You can see it here on the back wall, and it's called a Rock Solid. I think it's called Smart Solutions or something like that, who makes it, but Rock Solid tow guards. And this is a hard plastic. It has two layers. There's a enforcement layer up on top, a reinforcement that keeps them from flapping in the breeze so much. And then I cut open a little bit larger opening by removing a couple flaps so I could access the hitch. That was the only downfall that I really had. And you know, in most vehicles you may not need to do that. However, this obviously is too short for this new truck compared to a 97 F250 HD two-wheel drive. And not only that, but we now have a 2.5 inch shank instead of the 2-inch shank that used to be on there. So even though we love this tow shield, it's done a great job. We're gonna have to pack it off into a yard sale. This is the item that we got. It just arrived. It's called Rockstar Hitch Mounted Mud Flaps, and the package is heavy, but it did get here right away. These guys are in North Dakota, and yet I don't know, maybe 4 days at the most, we received it FedEx. When I was trying to dial in this hitch as far as the weight distribution, I took it down a country road, and the farmers had been driving out on the road carrying whatever it was in their field out onto the asphalt, and I ran through it. But just to give you an idea what this stuff looked like, you can see the back of the frame and relatively how clean and shiny it is, and then you can see this here. So that was on the front of the RV, the entire front of the RV, and it was only, like I said, 100 yards of driving. And that reminded me clearly of why we put that splash guard or that splash shield, that rock shield, on our other vehicle, because it kept everything off of our old RV. So now I want to protect this new one. So let's open this box and see what it looks like inside. Wow, this thing's healthy. These flaps are pretty healthy too. I thought, well, they're all wrapped up. It's probably going to take a while for them to get back to form since they've been in this box for who knows how long. But nope, not really. And I'll show you why. I got one more down here, and we cut this last one. That's some substantial rubber. Now I am going to leave this laying out in the sun to get those things to straighten out, but I don't think it's going to take very much, to tell you the truth. Lots of hardware, instructions. Everything looks like it's stainless. Almost positive that's stainless. It doesn't look galvanized. These are some sort of a real heavy aluminum bracket. And I'm not putting this on tonight, but I do want to look at it. I do want to inspect the whole thing. So let me get this out and see what it looks like. Wow, this looks really nice. I like the way this looks a lot. And hopefully they got the right shank size for me. Let me see what that opening is. Yeah, 2.5. So that's good. And of course, there's some other pieces here because this is adjustable as far as the height. So you can put the flaps right at the right level. And then these things here, they set on top of your bumper basically. And those are guards. And you can see it's all cut to kind of fit around your bumper. So This is going to be nice. So let's talk about the hitch that I have. This is going to be a little bit of a unique situation because this is, of course, a Pro Pride Stinger or a Pro Pride hitch shank. And it's going to be slightly different than what you're probably used to and what you're probably using on as far as a weight distribution. Now, they're very specific. Definitely look at their website about how much you have as far as dimension-wise from your bumper to the hitch. But you can see mine's kind of unique in that it's slanted. I don't know if I've got enough room. I haven't tried that out yet, and that's what I'm getting ready to do. One thing that I think is kind of odd is the lack of quantities and size of bolts and nuts being itemized in the instructions, which I think is kind of odd. But basically you have what they refer to as large flat washers, then you have small flat washers, you have 2 long carriage bolts. Of course, all these lock washers are the same, all these nuts are the same. I'm glad they did that. They're all the same size as far as what the attaching hardware is. You're going to have 1-inch carriage bolts, 1.25-inch carriage bolts, and 1.5-inch carriage bolts. So 4 1.5s, 1, 2, 3, 7, 10 1.25s, and 6-inch. And then of course you have these 2 brackets, you have these 2 pads, and then these are also some sort of protective pad. And then you have these, I'll just call them hockey sticks. That's for the XL mud flap. But as far as the installation, I mean, pretty much it's just going to apply to all. And then you have the main frame, and then you have this piece here. And as far as I can tell, they're saying that the L, the downward L, goes away from this. I'm going to double check that, and then we'll find out the hardware that needs to be used to bolt this together. Now they're saying as far as bolting it together, since this is all stainless hardware, they talk about anti-galling material, not using, you know, impacts or anything like that. They're specific about torque ratings, that kind of thing. Just be aware. You know, use your discretion. But I do need to find out how this gets mounted so I can test fit this on the truck to make sure that the clearance is okay, as far as this and the bumper and that hitch that I have. Okay, so I just put a few of those 1-inch bolts. It calls for actually all 6 of the short 1-inch carriage bolts to go in through these holes and hold that bracket on the backside. But this is the time that I suggest that you do the same thing that I'm doing, and that's test fit it. Make sure you have the distance that's needed for this thing to mount. And I can tell you that I am right at it. If you can tell here, when this thing is vertical straight up and down, it is right up against the welds. I do have a pin in there to make sure that the hitch is the right depth, but yeah, this is going to work, but it is right there. It is real close. Hopefully the adjustment bracket doesn't become an issue whenever I bolt that on, because that kind of goes in that space, but I don't think that it will. I'm doing this all loose fit just to make sure if there is a clearance issue, I find out now. Because as far as returning this, I'm sure that they would frown on it if you have torqued and tightened all these bolts down going through the steps and then find out that it doesn't work and try to send it back. Well, there's some pros and some cons to the hitch setup for the mud flap. Looks like it's going to work. Looks like it's going to fit just fine. However, there are some issues, and let me tell you what those are. Whenever you order yours, if you have a 2.5-inch shank like I do, make sure that you order at an additional $12 the clamp that is for a 2.5-inch shank. Although it adjusts up and down just fine and will accommodate a 2.5-inch shank, the side to side is determined by the casting of the aluminum clamp, and the bolt spacing for those 2 long bolts that hold it together won't allow for the shank to go in. So that's a con that I neglected to order that. However, it was a plus because I also wanted to order a couple of other features, such as those big openings on the bumper, which I'll try to show that to you. those large openings that are in the center, they make plates, flexible plates that are only connected on one side that block that off, give it a more finished look, offer more protection for stuff that's coming through there, and still allow you to reach in and put your chains on. All right, what is the other con? Well, if you're getting the XL times 1, 2, 3, whatever, this is a factory exhaust system. This is a again 2019 F250. It has a 6.2 liter gas engine in it, and you can see that the angle of the exhaust is just enough that I'm going to go ahead and put a heat shield on the inside of the mud flap. They sell that separate, and I was contemplating that in the first place. Since I had to order the other part for the hitch, I went ahead and ordered that and those inserts, so 3 pieces, and that qualified me for free shipping. If not, the shipping was going to be close to what that part was anyways. So an easy way around that is just to put a turn down on your exhaust to where it's going to be blowing down, but I want to keep the exhaust stock. In the meantime, I have to wait until those parts come. And the other thing to be careful of, remember how sharp I said that was? It's already scratched up my bumper, just moving it around for this test fit. I'm telling you, those edges are extremely sharp. I can't stress that enough. So again, another delay for you, but it's just a second. 3, 2, 1. Next day, well, a couple days, you don't know that. And we are already working on this thing. You've seen what I was doing there. These edges are just too sharp, and a couple of these holes, they're access holes, you know, to where you can reach in and put up your hooks and, you know, disconnect stuff, disconnect your pin, your hitch pin, all that stuff, and it's just really sharp. Kudos to the company for making nice precision cuts that are just right on the money, and I'm sure they're exacting, but those sharp edges, I couldn't deal with it. So I went ahead and took my 90-degree sander there and just went ahead and hit all these edges, just chamfered them all the way around real quick. Since it's aluminum, it knocks it down really fast. I wanted to basically focus on a couple places up here in case I decide to grab this and carry it by this somehow, which I don't think I can. I got to carry it by the hitch. This outside here, in case I'm walking by or my wife's walking by and we hit it with our knee. I don't want that to be sharp at all. And then of course these openings here, because that's where I'll be reaching through. You know, your hitch is here, so you'll be reaching through here underneath and you know, stuff like that to hang your hooks. So it's just a good idea. If you can, go ahead and knock down the edges. If not, you got to be really careful. So now that I've got the parts that I need, that's what the bracket looks like. They send you they send you the bracket, longer bolts, stainless of course, and then all the hardware that's needed to basically put this together, but not the hardware that attaches it to this, because you already have that. All right, so I'm going to go back to the instructions. I'm going to finish assembling what they call the gusset to the frame by putting in the shorter 1-inch carriage bolts, and then of course the lock washer and the nut. There's no flat washer on that. Then I'll finally get to this piece, which is definitely spaced further apart this way, and they give you longer bolts for this way, even though I think the other bolts would have been real close and might be able to work. Again, this is a $12 option. You need to order it definitely if you have a 2.5-inch shank, but pretty straightforward. I mean, you can see the instructions whenever you get it. Just follow along. This isn't so much a exact step-by-step how-to, but I'll cover most of the steps. And then after we get a lot of that assembled, it's time to put on the mud flaps. And the reason that they don't want you to be doing all the other fitment and everything, these mud flaps are heavy. And when you have 2 of them on there, I mean, it makes this a little bit more, you know, harder to wield and move around. All right, so now that I have all these torqued down to 32 foot-pounds, if you get a little torque wrench, you need to do 32 foot-pounds, or you need to know what that feels like. You don't want to over-tighten it. You don't want to under-tighten it, obviously. You're going to assemble the bracket for the hitch, and I might have gotten it just a little too close on these big ones. And what you're basically doing here is preparing it for the shank to go through, and you know, everything be adjusted for the shank and where it's at on your truck compared to this. Now, these things here, this is the way they come, and there's a couple protective covers here. Let me get those. You can see what they look like. I was thinking about rounding this off to help with the protective covers not getting galled, but actually I think it would probably help with holding them on there. So 2 protective covers, because these sit up on your bumper. And now I've got to get that heavy shank and position this up onto the truck. So you read in the instructions and they talk about pushing this down. What they're talking about is this here. They want this to be pushed down against your bumper as tight as possible, not overly tight, so that everything lines up and is basically 90 degrees with the shank, so that this will work correctly. Because the last thing you want to do is make it to where these aren't touching your bumper, or these aren't fully touching your bumper, the step area of the bumper, just because that helps with all the stabilization. You know, you can't have this thing going down the road with all this extra weight of those mud flaps and it wiggling around. Now, it's going to hold pretty darn tight because of this clamping system they have for the shank. But right now I have my hitch pin in there to keep the shank at the right distance, and I'm going to push down on this. As I do that, I'm going to tighten those long bolts for this hitch to basically clamp onto the shank. Once those are tight, because they're the easiest to get to, then I can go ahead and tighten the other ones to secure it in place. It's shaping up nicely. Looks pretty darn good there. I like the way that it looks. So now there's a couple things I want to point out. All these bolts are 32 foot-pounds, torque to 32 foot-pounds. It's very level, it's very straight, and it's very sturdy. I mean, very, very sturdy. I'm impressed. Hell, the black bumper cover's moving a little bit there more than anything else. All right, so I'm almost done here, and I want to point out a few things. And the main thing I want to point out is this P is on the passenger side. Make sure you read that correctly, and you should be able to read the P as it faces you on these hockey sticks. And I want to make note also that this bolt here goes through the mud flap and this hockey stick bracket, but it does not go through the main mount. It's just to give support to this part of the mud flap. And then of course these two here are going to require those long bolts, the longest bolts that are in the package other than these here. These are going to be the 1.5 inch long carriage bolts. And the same over here, there's no markings. You just got to know that's the passenger. And this is the driver's, then of course the opposite one. And what this does is it gives you the correct bend to keep this mat, this mud flap, up against the bracket so that it's not out. If you put these on backwards, they'll bend the wrong way and they'll actually face out. Don't ask me how I know that. And then these are accessories that I bought. The links are going to be down below for all this stuff. And that's because I want to be able to reach through and be able to hook up my chains and stuff, but it will protect, you know, a little bit coming from underneath here. Again, just that one little test drive that I took, and that farmer's mud that was all over the road, I mean, it's just everywhere on the camper. So this will protect the hitch that I've got. I mean, that hitch has grease zerks on it and all kinds of stuff, and I don't want any more crap on there than what it already sees from the road, and this will help protect that. So these are separate. You have to order these separate. Again, links will be in the description if I can find them. If not, it'll be linked to the company. And then as far as the last thing I need to do is on this side, add an exhaust shield. So let me do that. Then I get to bolt it all on there, and we'll talk about the whole thing and what it looks like and my overall impressions. All right, gang, here you got it. It's pretty much the finished product. I'm going to do a little trimming around these bolts here so these flaps hang straight and closed, just for appearance reasons. But as you drive down the road, you want as much flap on the other side of that hole as possible, or I would trim it to where it kind of fit the perimeter perfect, but it's flimsy enough it could blow through and kind of defeat the purpose of blocking the holes. Now I know a lot of this is overkill as far as like those holes being blocked, but this is definitely much better than the one that I had before. And you heard how much I loved it. The only problems with this one is whenever you mount the heat shield, you know, there's a couple of bolts here. I went ahead and hit it with some rubberized undercoating so it looks a little better. But you can see the heat shield here. I wanted it mounted a little bit higher. The problem is then I wouldn't be able to access these bolts up here for the mud flap if that became an issue. And also, the higher that they were, the more they would be into or behind, you know, this part itself. Well, that's not good, because then when you're driving down the road, you'll get a noise of some kind from those bolts most likely hitting. I could have drilled and mounted it slightly higher and probably not had much for noise, but I wanted to play it safe. I wanted it to be where the heat shield was going to do its job. Again, this is an accessory after the fact. But this will protect it from the heat that may come back here. You can see it kind of diverts it away to some extent. Yeah, that's definitely worth it. Overall, I think this is going to do a very good job. Very, very good job. The one thing that I'll have to buy, you know, it's one of those things, you always got to buy something. The one thing I'll have to buy, though, is a different anti-rattle hitch clamp, or whatever you want to call it, because the one that I have, there's no way that I can fit it up in there with that bracket that holds this onto the shank already. However, that other design may allow it. Okay, so there's one negative. The other negative, guys, I'm not weak at all. And this is heavy. You're going to feel it. So if you have a tendency to be taking off your hitch when you get to the campsite, or again, if you have a Pro Pride setup like this, or even just the weight distribution, it's some weight. There's some weight there. Those flaps are not light. They are very heavy duty, and I'm glad of it. I'm really am, because this should protect for, I mean, quite a bit of stuff. The plastic ones I never had a problem with. No rocks or anything, you know, that I've ever heard that were going through or breaking it. But this is just another level of peace of mind going to something this heavy duty. So yeah, very, very cool. I love the way that it fits. It's got a great contour to it. It looks good from the side, and it's definitely protecting the RV, and that's the main thing. As I may have mentioned before, the camper, it's a 2020 Rockwood, and you know, we plan on having this for a long time. You know, you pay money for something. I'm concerned about this. I don't know what it would take to put a rock through there. And then people are worried about this windshield, which I'm not sure why. That's a DOT windshield that's on there. I mean, it's the same type of a windshield you would have in a car. It's a laminate. It's not a safety glass thing, but you know, I guess something could get up there, and it could come from my tires. Okay, so like most of my videos, this has gone longer than I wanted to. I hope I covered everything for you. I'm going to put the links down below for everything that I can find. Some of it might be on Amazon. Some of it might be at the manufacturer's website. The supplier or the company's in North Dakota. And as far as shipping, it got here relatively quick. It wasn't, you know, like California to Northeast Ohio, slow. It got here within just a few days, and that made it a little bit easier. So if you want to continue to see installations like this, click the link down below, anything that's to do with Amazon, or just go to our Amazon affiliates account. That helps us out, helps this channel to where we can provide videos like this. And if you guys are RVing and you want the heaviest protection that I've seen so far, this one's pretty good, this Rockstar. This is not a paid advertisement. I bought this with my own money, and I'm happy that I did. The other choice was that Rock Tamer. I didn't like the way that it didn't go all the way across. I didn't like the way that it was at different angles. You know, the way that you got your height was to tilt the bars and make it to where they would, you know, angle down more, kind of like taking your handlebars on your bicycle and making them come closer to you or further away. I didn't like that. I just didn't like that whole idea. So I went with this company. I'm glad I did. So I hope this helped you out. And as always, I hope to see you out there. Bye.